And live, yay! All right.
All right.
Sorry, we're learning late. We just finished Feedback Friday, and Tony arrived.
You did.
You did. You arrived
Here.
on Feedback Friday. How are you, my friend?
I'm wonderful, marvelous, as you would say.
Marvelous. Looking, you got a bit of a tan. You've been out. Have you been doing some shows on stage somewhere?
It was my daughter's promotion yesterday from middle school to high school. We were sitting in the sun the whole time, so I get out quite a bit, just exercising here and there.
You've been touring?
No, but mostly in the studio. And different things, different one-off gigs and things here and there. Just
anything fun you can tell us about? Albums that aren't released yet.
Yeah, it's all that. It's all that stuff. I mean, I'm very fortunate because I was dialed into the a lot of people do the home recording stuff these days. I was dialed into that very early.
Good.
Since the 2000s, early 2000s.
Right.
And so I mean I've completed sessions from Australia, from Japan, from Russia, from all over Asia, South America, the UK, of course, and all over Europe. So it's fantastic.
Which makes me think we need to have a link. Where do we get the link? Let's make sure that we put it on when we put this video up in the Academy. We'll have a link for anybody who wants to hire you.
Absolutely,
it's quite surprising. When I did a video with Kenny Aronoff, I've done three with him, I think, 2 or 3 with him. When I did the first one with Kenny Aronoff, somebody wrote to me and said, "Oh, that's really cool. You're working with Kenny, and I wish I could." And I was like, "Here's his email."
I just played on a session with him, so
yeah, it's like, and then suddenly I get all these Academy members going, "Oh, I hired Kenny Aronoff." I was like, "Dude, it's like there's not this sort of like club." I think when I was up and coming, I thought that there was a sort of exclusive club that you and Kenny and everybody was a member of, and I wasn't able to join.
Of course. No, absolutely.
It's just not like that.
And it's become so much more accessible these days because I'm very surprised, pleasantly surprised by the caliber of musicians that I've collaborated with online.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I mean, there's probably half and half. There's half doing it in the studio.
Yep.
And then half that I do myself. And that's where my course is perfect because it shows both aspects of
what you do.
Yes. The process really doesn't change for me. And I go about creating my bass tracks in the same way. And it's all about the music, and it's all about what does the bass need to do to complement it. At the end of it all.
And I'll be blunt. I didn't have any input. I mean, I sat on the couch, like doing my emails, answering 10,000 questions from Produce Like a Pro members, but I did not say you need to do this or do that.
I thought you were on Snapchat.
I don't think I have Snapchat.
I don't either. I don't either.
All the kids use Snapchat. Do you use Snapchat?
Yeah.
You do?
Yeah.
Is it like super popular?
I think so, but I think it's more like a personal thing, I guess.
Should I get a Produce Like a Pro Snapchat?
No.
Question. Hey, Ralph. How are you? How are you, Ralph? All right.
I know that people do it. They create all these filters with the funny faces and all that. I'm resisting that.
Oh.
God bless Rudy Sarzo. I love him.
Is he doing it?
He must be hooked on Snapchat right now because he has all these faces with beards and reindeer antlers and noses and all that.
Well, I could get a hipster beard. Could I look like
anything.
Andrew? Andrew, come on camera a second. This is
Yes,
this
you
is
could.
Andrew. This is Andrew here. Look at this. Look at this.
How's it going?
Look at that. Woo!
You could do it all.
Wow.
Don't do it, Warren, please.
My wife would never.
No,
let me.
not the mustache. Snapchat.
Oh.
Nothing against Snapchat. It's a lot of fun, but I'm just resisting because I don't want to look like Bambi. That's all.
You don't look like Bambi.
Yes.
I know.
But go back to what I said. I mean, some of these online things. I mean, they have Vinnie Colaiuta on drums and Greg Bisson there,
Yep.
and so I say the one I recently did with Kenny Aronoff. It's like the players that you collaborate with online these days, and they have the facility to do that as well, which is wonderful.
Right.
Vinny Appice, we've done quite a few with him. So yes, you can.
So you get Vinny's drums and you're playing bass?
Yes. It's such a blast.
It's so
such a
amazing.
blast.
Oh, it's okay, Ralph. This is all very sort of last minute putting together. We know that many of our viewers are all over the world. Anyway, so speaking of which, so Terry says, if you had a Squier bass, would you bother adding a new bridge for sustain or tone, or would you just get a proper Fender? I'm looking for a basic sound, sustained sound that can be a bass sound on different sessions and would later add some distortion extreme. Oh, there's two questions. So basically, I think he's just, you know,
the Squier bass, yeah. First of all, I think the Squier basses are great. If anything, now I'm a little bit of a traditionalist when it comes to the bridges, especially, and the pickups actually. But here's my what I call my phone fretless. It still has the original bridge, which is the classic,
really?
Yeah, the classic 70s bridge, which Fender still puts. It's on my signature model, and it's on all the 70s type basses, and beyond that too. But to me, there's something about the tone of those that just is right, that sits well with the mix and all the frequencies. And putting on a high mass bridge alters those things. And I actually tried it as an experiment. You get to hear about the high mass bridges and the sustain and the tone and all that. Well, it definitely changed all that, but not for the better to my ears.
Right.
It hyped the high end, it gave it a funky mid, and the lows were all messed up. Now, producers, what do you want? People walk in with this strange hyped bass, and it's got active and 10 strings. You just say, well, it's great. Do you have a Fender? Right? A lot of time that will happen. Why? Because Fender has, over the years, it's proved itself. It has a track record. And so you start adding and changing things, changing pickups, putting active in there, and the bridges, as far as I'm concerned. It changes that fundamental into something that is not very pleasing. Honestly, I'm not sure what you're needing that sustain for, but to me, there's plenty that you get out of a regular bridge. And yes, put a Fender bridge on it. Don't go with a high mass. Stick with just the classic 70s vintage bridge. And also, you may want to consider putting in some Fender pickups rather than the Squier pickups that are in there too, because that just gives it a little extra.
I suppose my next question, you probably know where I'm going. What about those 80s Squiers, the Japanese ones? Those were
those were great. Yeah, really, really great.
If we're talking like Korean Squier versus Japanese, my memory, and I think about you know Francis, don't you, Frank Gunnery?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean he had that Japanese Squier that was like eyes closed, as good as any American guitar of the period.
Absolutely, yeah. No, that was a great period for Squier in Japan. I mean, Japan made great instruments anyway, but it's like I don't know what was going on. They were just like on a mission to make the best instrument they could. So yeah. I bet the Squier basses, they're great.
So I think the question back is, I'm sure Terry is assuming, you know, I'm assuming that Terry's talking about a brand new Squier, you know, saving the money, you know. You'd have to do the math, but my guess is if you bought, if it was a couple of $100, but then the bridge was X number of dollars and the pickups, presumably the machine heads. Have you found the cheaper machine heads are good on the bass?
Yeah, they're okay on the Squier.
They're okay?
Yeah.
So it's just a case of probably putting Fender pickups in, you know, American Fender pickups and American bridge, and you probably got,
that would
get it pretty close.
Yeah, it'd be good.
Pretty close.
Good. Yeah.
But if he was mentioning a Japanese Squier from the 80s, it's probably good to go.
Yeah, if you have one of those, hey, hold on to it, because they're probably selling for a pretty penny now, because people know that those were great basses, and it was a limited time and everything, and they stopped doing it because they were too good.
They were too good and too competitive.
Yeah, so...
I remember you probably remember this too, the original series, they had Fender in the normal size logo, and underneath in tiny letters they put Squier.
Right.
And then they realized, oops.
It's the other way around now, isn't it?
Yeah, then they put
Squier by Fender.
By Fender, yeah, because that confused people, but also more importantly, they were like, oh dear, we're ruining our own brand because we've got these Japanese, now at the time, like half price but just as good. Sorry, Fender America, but at that time they were just as good, made in Japan.
Yes.
You know, without I like Yamaha acoustics from the 70s and the 80s.
And that was
Because
a
they're
tough
built in
time
there
for
in Japan.
Fender in the 80s anyway, because that was when Japan especially, there's a lot of hot rod guitars. People were modding guitars and improving on the basic Fender model. And Fender was being very, this is what we make. This is what we make, and it doesn't change. And that was the end of the CBS era. And that's when they basically, that's when it went down. CBS let them go. I think it was 85 when Bill Schultz took over and built it up again. So that was a really tough time. So
Yeah,
Squire was really holding the fort, to be honest.
I remember there was a Strat. Was it called a System something? System 8? System... And it was... I was working in a music store in those days, and I remember we were selling these American-made Strats for a couple of £100.
Right.
And they were just starting to try, in the mid-80s. It was probably what you're talking about, that changeover.
Yes.
So they started to suddenly like sell slightly souped-up ones. They didn't quite get it initially. They took like standard Strats, like painted them all black and put a humbucker in the back. And they slowly got into like evolving and getting it together. But yeah, it would have been a tough thing because, it's an iconic instrument.
Yeah, and you don't want to mess with it, but they also realized they had to change the times, and that was a sticky time. CBS, was like, for a while they actually stopped making US instruments.
You did?
Short time, yes.
Well, they're trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and then when they stopped doing that, everybody wanted them. It's funny.
Oh, wow.
It's like reverse psychology.
We got the audio going? Yep. Okay, great. Just checking that we have the audio going for the Academy.
I've forgotten now. Recording studio, I'm getting hot in here. You're used to it.
Well, we
It is really, it gets really hot.
roll off some
That's why
of
I'm
the
getting all,
It's because we've got lights on.
I know, all the lights and the equipment. It produces a lot of heat. You're used to it, so you find
No, we need the AC on. We need the AC on. So Terry also says, I'm looking for a basic sound, sustained sound that can be a bass. In different stage sessions of an add later distortion extreme effect, starting sound needs to be good. So he's basically just saying, he's qualifying the question. I mean,
Yes.
the reality is we can agree that if you buy a new Squire now, you do a couple of basic upgrades, you're going to get pretty diverse.
Yeah, and you say about the sustained sound. I mean, the regular bridges they sustain quite a lot. As long as you get the intonation and the bass is set up and you got everything working properly, it sustains long enough as far as I'm concerned. And then you mentioned about doing later had some distortion, extreme EQ. The distortion itself will elongate the note. It will bring out the sustain. If you're talking about some, extreme stuff there. So, I really don't think that what you'll gain from the high mass bridge sustain wise is worth what you're going to get from all the rest of the EQ, because it does change the EQ drastically. And then if you're going to add distortion and extreme EQ on top of that, I don't know, it's going to get so far away from being a bass that it's going to be, well, it'll still be cool, but don't do it.
All right, we've got Ralph's question. Ralph is online at the moment. Hey, Ralph.
Hi, Ralph.
Ralph says, what in the recording situation is important for a good sounding bass and for the best atmosphere of the player? I'm going to ask these as 3 different questions.
Okay, that's a great question. What is important for a
good
good
sounding
sounding
bass.
bass guitar?
And the best atmosphere of the player.
There's 2 questions really there.
Yeah, okay.
It's very interesting because, there's so many different styles of music. One thing I like about the tutorial that we put out is that, and I came into this not knowing what the songs were. I had no idea. All I knew is that they were going to be diverse in the styles, which they were. There was one that was like a folk rock, almost a 60s thing, then more of a modern pop rock kind of vibe, and then piano singer-songwriter. And so 3 completely different approaches. And I did not change the amp sound once in all of those. I didn't add any effects. it all came from the fingers, and I used the plectrum, the pick, on one song.
Plectrum.
Yes.
How very English of you.
Of course, had to throw it in there. Got to keep on schedule here.
Absolutely.
You know, and then also
Schedule the schedule.
Yes.
We schedule the schedule.
Let's schedule the schedule. For instance, and I show this because part of it is, to me, getting the right sound to start with is the starting point. And I'll show this because we're not plugged in, but I do show it on the course. Playing, for instance, down here, it gives a very tight and punchy sound. Playing further up here, and the lighter touch will give it a very fat and warm and singing sound. And then you've got all these different tones in between. And then the good old-fashioned tone. Don't underestimate the power of that. I mean, you know, Jameson type sounds, I will roll it all the way off and you know, mute it and get a very kind of dead and a good thud, like a low end punch to it. And then the pickup selector switch. I mean, I'm talking about my bass in particular. It relates to my bass, but every bass has different facilities for changing the tone and for playing it in different ways. It all comes from there. And the tone that we got was very, very different on each one of these tunes. So I spend a lot of time just finding the right song, the right sound for the song. Because you can play the right part, but if the sound isn't right, it might not sound good. So I spend a lot of time with that. But I know what my bass does, and I know when I hear a song, oh, I'm hearing that kind of sound. So I immediately go to whatever position and tone. So I'm in the ballpark. And then I experiment from there. I may add, I didn't need to with these songs, but I may add a little extra overdrive to the sound, because that's not to give distortion. It's not about giving a distorted sound. It adds a fatness and a warmth, because adding distortion and then playing really lightly widens the sound and gives you a sustain that's, you know, it's just very pleasing. Oh, it's like a vintage kind of sound. By the way, I wasn't going through an amp here. I was going through a Line 6 simulator.
Which is great. I wonder, can one of you guys look up on eBay? How much those things go for?
Yeah, I mean, I think Line 6 has an equivalent of it now, but there's the Pod Pro, and it's, yeah, I had it on one sound. It wasn't like I was changing.
I think Yamaha bought Line 6.
Really?
I think so. Isn't that correct? Yeah, I think they bought Line 6.
But so but this is a setup that I've used on literally hundreds, maybe thousands of songs. I don't know. I've lost count. But it's going back 20 years since I've had this unit, and it's never let me down with the variety. But also, you know, talk about, what was the question again? Important for good sounding bass guitar. That was all about getting that sound. Here first. That's where it starts. Fingers, how you play it, tough, gentle, or the pick, the plectrum. So start with that.
Of course, for you, you got fretless or fretted.
Well, yes, and I am known as the fretless monster, but I do play fretted on a lot of recording sessions because that's what's needed. And it's all about listening to the music first and seeing what it needs. I'm not like one of these people that says, well, I only play fretless. No, if it needs fretted, then that's what it needs. And my personal preference is not for a 5-string either, because you know, the frequency of all the music. You got the kick drum, you got guitars, you got maybe keyboards and everything, which all cover a very specific frequency range in the spectrum. You start getting too low, start adding active and adding a lot of low notes, and you're starting to get into territory of the kick drum and everything. And it's, I mean, hey, if it's insisted that I play those low notes, I will typically detune a 4-string.
There's a big. I love you mentioning this, because there's a big bunch of baloney that's spoken about this stuff because obviously in like metal, we're swapping batteries here on his receiver.
Having a technical break.
Well, not on his receiver, on his transmitter. Batteries have been swapped.
We're good.
And we're good.
Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me now? Well, I think from here it will well, Ralph actually asked this question on this on here, but so there's a lot of baloney talked about this, and this is why I've been the last couple of weeks I've been interviewing and talking to mastering engineers. I actually had dinner with Gavin Lurson last night, who's
nice,
an amazing mastering engineer. We interviewed Howie Weinberg, who's coming up. We just did Warren Sokol. We've got Brian Lucy coming up, because there's a lot of baloney talk online about low end, and these guys are mastering music that's being mixed by every mixer in the world. Now, you can have my opinion, you can have Tony's opinion, or you can have an opinion of a mastering guy who, on an average, I think Gavin told me they are doing an album a day, every day, just him, and between him and Ruben, they are doing 2 to 3 albums a day, every single day, 5-6 days a week.
It's amazing.
So what they're hearing, so you're getting, and Howie Weinberg is very famous for low end, that's one of the big things, because he was there at the cusp. And you remember this word, the CD revolution. And this is not talked about as well. Right? It's like, you used to master for vinyl, and all the low end meant. Like I just did a Van Halen 1 at Sunset Sound with a bunch of kids. And they were miking the kick drums with Shure 546s, which are budget versions of 57s.
Right.
They didn't need to put any more low end in there because there was no low end in the records. As much as I love albums that we grew up on, you put on the original vinyl of a Zeppelin record, which is phenomenal. The low end is there, don't get me wrong, but it's not there like it is now with digital and extended low end. So you are hitting on great stuff here, because you hit that low A that metal guys, or low C or low B. The point is like, it is not below the kick drum. If it is below the kick drum, well, it isn't. It just isn't below the kick drum. So Howie is sitting there and he's sculpting the low end. The mix is sculpting the low end. So yes, there is a note there. Of course it's there. You hear the definition of the B and the C and the A. Those low, super low notes. But they're not. They're not like. We don't suddenly have a PA system which goes down to like 1 hertz. You know what I mean? It's right. There's still some mathematics involved.
Absolutely.
Let's say, here's absolutely. Sorry to go on one of those little diatribes that I'm famous
No,
for,
and one of my favorite bass players is John Deacon from Queen.
Cool. Let's talk about Queen for 4 hours.
You study his stuff, and he was very much influenced by the great James Jamerson of Motown. A lot of John Deacon's stuff is further up. A lot of those guys, they wouldn't always do the low E. It would be the octave up, and which, you know, I know why people play the 5-string. It's like you still got that low E, but then you've got the boom 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 boom. You got that note below it to walk up to it. But we didn't do that. You walk up to the higher E. It creates a lot more space, a lot more groove, and a lot more just, I don't know, it fills up the space perfectly. It's not fighting. So anyway, it is a personal pet peeve of mine, the 5-string bass. I still do it if it's called
it's interesting,
because the music first.
This is great, because for us as producers and engineers and mixers, this is a really good discussion, because 2 weeks ago we were with Irko, and Irko is an Italian mixer, does like Kanye and all this kind of stuff. And the thing is if he has those super, super lows in the bass, which obviously for him is a lot of keyboard bass, but wherever it comes from, he moves his kick up.
Right.
So suddenly his kick is shelved at 80 or 100 rather than 60 and 40, where we want rock kicks to be boom. We want we want the John Bonham lows that you can now get. We want the boom, God. We want that super low. But if you're going to have your bass go down there, then suddenly your kick is moving up to 80 and 100. And instead of going off, it's more dock, which is cool. But in rock and roll, right, you know, we want to hear bottom kick at least.
Absolutely.
Most people do.
Absolutely.
Metallica, you still got that. down there, you know.
Yes.
It'll suddenly be like,
yes.
it's,
And I actually,
so it's a decision.
now here's a little irony. I'm contradicting myself a little bit.
Hey, I do it every
Because
sentence.
keyboard
I'm not an expert.
keyboard low bass is different because it's a lot more contained.
Right.
It's a lot more, what's the word? It's just
Contain's a good word.
yeah, okay.
It's a purer signal.
Yeah, it is. There's not so much of a
Second or third
I mean,
harmonic.
yeah, exactly. You play a bass; it's a very rich tone.
Mhm.
Takes up a lot more room. A keyboard bass is very tight and focused, and so it's a lot more control. I actually like some of that sub stuff when it's done right. The keyboard kind of stuff. Viking is one of my favorite soundtracks. It has there's this sound that they've used right from the beginning. It starts like,
Yeah, it's huge.
it's so big. It's the only thing that's playing at that time.
Right.
And it creates a lot of tension. So, you know, when it's done right, it's done right. But we are talking about bass guitar primarily here. And so 95% of the time I will stay on the 4-string, and people have said, this might need a 5-string. And I send it back to them and like, no, it didn't.
I'm going to run to the restroom, but I'm going to leave you with this, the second part, which is kind of
Yes.
good. You can talk shit about me. Well, don't say it on camera. Talk schnizzle about me. I'm going to swore. It said, because the second part was question, best atmosphere for the player. So that would probably come down to like the producer, like how they make you
That's
feel.
a really good question. Yeah,
A really good question for me to leave, and you can be like,
well,
talking about producers and engineers.
yes. Well, now I can talk about them.
Turning my mic off so you can hear me in the bathroom.
That's a good idea. You wouldn't want to hear and go tinkle. So Warren is great because when I was doing this, you may have heard him say earlier that he said nothing. Now, if you get a great player in, and it goes for any instrument, you basically, the producer's job is just to keep everybody playing together at the same time, because great players know what they're doing. Some players need more guidance. I was very thankful because I pretty much did the whole course, coming in and doing what I do into a recording session. I was left to do it. Now you got to remember that I've been very fortunate. I've been in the recording studio for decades, and so it's, gosh, it makes me feel old. But and doing the digital realm for, well, since the early 2000s. So I was bringing all of my experience from that into this course, and into every time I go into the studio, I bring that experience. So what makes me feel comfortable is when I feel valued, when I feel trusted. And you know, every situation is different. Some producers have a very set agenda of what they want to do. They need something very, very specific. So, you know, we need to, I work with them and I give them what they need. I will say, hey, if this is what you need, then I go right for it, and I try to be as efficient and uncomplaining as possible about that, because sometimes, you know, that's what it needs. But I've been very fortunate because a lot of the time people will just let me do my thing and say, and they may have different ideas and they'll give me input. But I like to also I don't like to record too loud enough. So I like to be able to say, hey, you know, put the speakers at a certain level if I'm recording in the control room. And so be able to just dial in and get my sound. You know, a lot of it is about setting the music and the mood, so it's very relaxed and conducive for me to just be myself. Because, you know, there is a pressure going into a recording session. You're on the spot to deliver. I mean, I came into the 3 songs on this tutorial not having heard them. I had no idea what I was going to get into, what they were going to be. And so I spent time at the beginning preparing and listening. I was listening to what the music was all about, what I felt the music needed, and spent my time doing that, getting myself, and it may be, oh, can we, you heard earlier, it was really hot in here, so I said, can I turn the air conditioning on? So that made me feel more relaxed and more comfortable. Maybe the lighting needs to be a certain way. Gosh, do I sound like a prima donna? I'm not. I'm just like, usually it's like, oh, Warren said, yeah, it is hot in here, so we turned it down. And so you spend a little time on the front end. I spent my time on some of the songs. I charted them out because that seemed like it was a good thing, so I'd be prepared. So I wasn't guessing, oh, what section is coming up next? Oh, so yes, I did that. On some of the songs, I didn't. So I actually spent on each song more time setting up, getting the mood, getting the vibe right, setting things so that I was comfortable. And it varies. There's no rules for what that is. It's just whatever it is. You know, you turn your phone off, make sure there's no distractions. And then you spend the time learning and looking at each section. And then I spent very little time actually recording. And that's the point, is getting comfortable, getting dialed in, and then you're ready to go. And so you're ready to play. One of them I did 3 takes, all the way through, 1 take on each one. And that's because I'd spent the time, I charted it out and got my sound and was ready to go. And so there's no rules as to what it is that makes a bass player feel comfortable. Now, back in the day, it would have been like, oh, yeah, let's have a few beverages and let's get really relaxed and comfortable. I don't need to do that anymore. But, you know, you've got to keep the reins on it a little bit. But I come in focused, prepared, ready to work, and have a good hand. And then most of the time, people are on the same page with that. So everything's very relaxed and comfortable right from the get-go. So take your time, set it up, and have fun. Here he is, perfectly on time.
Turning my microphone back on. Can you hear me, Eric?
Yes, I can.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
I'm hearing, look, that was 2 questions right there. We went into some detail, didn't we?
And Ralph is asking something. Can I just squeeze past it?
Of course you can.
Get in.
See,
and then you can
as soon
squeeze
as you're
back
going
in.
to start hogging everything.
Oh, no. It's really about you anyway. These guys here are enough of me waffling on as it is.
These are good questions, though. And you know, one thing I liked about this tutorial was that sometimes when you're doing it, recording sessions, you don't think about these things. You just do it because we've done it for so long.
Sure.
You just go and plug and play. You make all the tweaks. You do dial this. You change the tone. You do all these things, but you're not sharing that process. So what it was like I was going in with a different mindset. I was like actually real time, real world, going into and approaching these songs and talking it through every step of the way. That's why you didn't have to say too much, because you didn't have to ask the questions, why did you do that? Sure. It was cool because I had fun, because it's like these 3 songs in 3 different styles brought out different aspects, and I was able to get into the moment and share those things as I was doing it. So, you know, these questions are great. I encourage them because it shows and points out different things, questions that we might not think of, because we just do it. Here's the next question here. More of a question of DI, the bass itself, or the strings. Record better with an amp box / mic or directly in the mixer. Okay.
You may have answered that somewhat because you were talking about the line 6.
Yeah, typically, yes, I do use an amp 2.
Right.
And I use my amp of choice as a Fender Bassman 100T, which is an all tube amp, but it has so much versatility. You can dial in the tone. It's very clean. It has a great DI straight out the back of it, if need be. And and I'm not a mic guy. I don't know about the mics. I leave it to people like Warren to choose whether, because every producer has his preference. But, you know, my job is to get the bass sounding good at the source. Because once you've done that, it's like a good sounding drum kit. and a great player know how to tune their kit, a great bass player or any player will know how to get their instrument fine-tuned, sounding good, and how to play it and tune the amp or whatever unit they're using so that it sounds good, so that their job is easy. You should be able to put any mic on it and it will sound good.
Yeah, within reason. No,
absolutely.
Yeah, because I think about it. I remember I've heard so many different stories, and when I hear the stories of different miking techniques, they always excite me, and I think, oh wow, this guy did this, and then as I've been doing this longer, I realize there's so many variables that have got nothing to do with the mics. So what it is like, let's just say you turn up with I don't know, your bass amp and your tone is super huge and enveloping and got so much low end, and a song I'm recording doesn't quite work with the kick, but it's inspiring to you to hear that in your headphones,
right?
Or it's inspiring to you to be in a room, because sometimes, you know, sometimes it might be more of a live recording situation. Now, what would I do? Well, maybe I'll stick a small diaphragm condenser on there, just because I don't need all of that super low. There's no two ways about it. And then maybe on a monitor section, I give you a little bit more low end for you to be inspired than I want to record.
But for me, I have to interject here. As a player, I would not be giving you that kind of sound if it was not appropriate for the song. Because to me, if I'm not complimenting and helping the song, then I can't be inspired by that. It's not only about the bass.
No, exactly. You've got so there's two things. What we have here, and what we're blessed as, we have a sophisticated player. And I don't mean blah, 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 blah. I mean, like, you have intelligence and you have a lot of acquired knowledge. I think from a producer, engineer, up and coming, establishing yourself point of view, is like most of the time musicians turn up with not necessarily substandard gear. They might have really expensive gear, but they haven't yet quite figured out the interplay where you are going to deliver. Because you're going to be like, oh, I need this bass. Right. I want to use the fretless because Warren said to me he wants to hear more melody in this song. So you might be like, and that might be, I don't really know. You might want to pick up. Yeah. So you're thinking that, and the fretless can mimic the lead vocal more because you can slide to a note, which obviously singers do. They don't go, you know, we singers blend between stuff. So
but what you're saying, you know, sometimes we are dealing with players who may not be so experienced. You might also have a combination of an inexperienced player and producer, which leads us to, it's absolutely vital to get a great DI sound. Right. Because, you know, as long as you've got that, then, you know, you can either reamp or you can use plugins. You can do it. There's various ways you can create a sound.
Number one thing as a up-and-coming producer engineer, the number one thing I'll say is that when I record a good player or a great player, I barely compress at all.
I am not a fan of compression. People ask me bass players. No,
you don't need to do it if you're an even sounding great player. Yes. However, when you're a young up and coming player, you may have all the chops in the world and have great left hand technique and all this kind of stuff. But I will guarantee when you're a young player, as I was once, a shredding young guitar player, it was like, you know, it was like my dynamics were all over the place. My right hand was maybe a little too heavy at times or was perfect at others. And so a lot of compression. Now, when I work with guys like you, I use compression as a tool. It's like, do I want it to kind of go, ah, do I want that attack at the front? Maybe it's what the sound of this song should be. But I don't need to compress you to control your dynamic range, because like a great jazz player, they all play off each other, they work around each other.
Have their own dynamics, So to me, so yeah, it's a good point. Inexperience. It all depends on the player and the situation. You know, I have to.
Compression is your friend with the younger, well, not even younger. It's not a youth thing. It's like the less experienced studio player that hasn't.
I mean, even with drums, it's like I see on a kick drum. You know, some players will get excited and they do a big old kick, and it's like it sticks out so much. So, but yeah, you're right. Compression has a place.
Compression has a place. I think I've got certain things that I think we can highlight from the production point of view, the engineering point of view. Like, obviously, I play string instruments as well. One of the things that I think a lot of younger players when they're working with amps, you can get away with murder. You can smack the schnizzle out of your bass because you sit there and you dial the low end in, and it's always kind of triggering that low end, and there is a compression factor going on with the architecture of the amp. Even if it's solid state, it doesn't matter. It's not all about tube and solid state. That's a whole other conversation that we don't have to go into. But that amp is going to soak up a lot of the transients.
Yes.
However, you know that when you're hitting a bass really, really hard, that's where all the low end disappears.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the harder you hit it, it just gets it chokes the sound.
Yeah.
So I mean, a lot of the time I'm playing really, really light, and the sound is so fat. I love that. I love that. And also, if you're hitting really hard as well, it'll clip on the DI and all sorts of ugly sounds and clicks and bangs and everything. Thank you. And so, yeah, but you know, that's one thing that just comes with experience. So,
but it's a great piece of information for a producer to say to his bass player.
Yeah, definitely. And it's essential. I mean, you know, and Warren's great because all the great producers will know how to see the strengths of a player, encourage that, and bring out kindly. They'll encourage you know, any weaknesses. Oh, let's try that one again. You know, try this. But it's a great responsibility you producers have.
Well, it gets easier with age because you've worked with all the different variables. You know, when I was younger, I had a skill set that was like this, and now my skill set's like this. And with that is also a lot more latitude. Like I let a lot more things go because I know how to deal with them now.
Right.
When I was younger, even when I started to realize all the things we're talking about, you know, maybe 20 years ago when I knew don't hit it too hard, don't do this, don't do that. The problem is like I relied on that too much. So it's also, and this goes to the question with the atmosphere for the player. So if I've got a young bass player coming in, I have to make a choice based on my interaction with them. Do I spend a long time working with them on a one-to-one basis? Some guys, like you, if there was something I knew or you knew and you could help each other out, I'd take it. You come along and you go, hey, Warren, I really like what you're doing here, but I did this session like 10 years ago with Glyn Johns. And Glyn Johns said to me, Glyn Johns showed me this trick, and I'd be like, wow. Now, that's great. You take it from me, I'd take it from you. We would help each other. But that's not always appropriate. When I've got a young player, I have to get into his head a little bit and understand that he might be so nervous about just being in the studio that I just have to figure out a way of capturing it the best possible way. That if I go in there and start like ripping apart his playing, even in the most loving way, I might derail the whole session. So that's a good thing. You know, we have to know our tricks. We have to know when to go in. And I think that's what Ralph was touching on, the best atmosphere for a player. You know, like we need a skill set on all levels. We need to understand how to get the best performance out of a bass, but we also need to understand that sometimes, especially when you're moving fast, you're trying to capture these days, sometimes 5 songs in one day with the whole rhythm section, guitars and everything. Do I really need to go in there and derail and make this bass player feel really crap about himself? Because he might not be open to it. You know?
And he may not even have the ability, the skill set to even do that anyway, even if you did help him and tried to.
And you think about bands like Korn and Tool, which I personally think are the worst bass sounds ever in the history of the bass.
Absolutely, but
I freaking hate the sound of the bass on the Tool records and also on the Korn records. However, there are a million people in this world that would completely disagree with me, that go out and buy their records. And God bless them, because, you know, if we all like the same music, it'd be a very boring world. So just imagine a young band like Korn coming into your studio for the first time, and they've got tweeters, and the bass player wants. Just imagine, like, you know, say I was the producer for the first Korn record, and I was like lecturing the bass player on his bass tone. You know,
you'd be gone.
I'd be gone. Or, actually, worse still, I might destroy what was unique about them. I also think of Anthrax. My friend, you know, obviously, our mutual friend, Greg D'Angelo, was the original drummer in Anthrax.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he was the first drummer. Now, he did demos, and I think he may be on some of the first recordings. There's some rare stuff around. But Anthrax is responsible for that super clicky drum sound. And a lot of that was to do with the fact that it was really badly recorded. Because if you've got a lot of mics on a drum kit and they're all out of phase of each other,
Right.
the first thing that disappears is the low end.
Right.
You know, it's hard to cancel very high frequencies when they're this small. To get them exactly to cancel each other is quite difficult. But it's very easy to cancel low frequencies if they're all masking each other. You know, if you've got too much low end in there and it's not sculpted properly and the mics are in bad positions, you go from like boom, boom, boom to dicky, dick, 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 dick. So you get this clickety, clickety, clickety. You get the quarter they used to put on the kick drum.
Yeah.
Suddenly all the toms don't have the low end because they're out of phase with the overheads and whatever. All these different mics are all hyped up and out of phase. So you get a which for a purist like me growing up on Zeppelin is like, or, you know, Roger Taylor.
I was just listening.
Tones.
Can you remember Loser in the End from Queen 2?
Of course.
I was just listening to that. I had to put it on a couple of the tom sound on that is, I mean, it's like, it's the best thing on the song. Maybe
Sure.
the record. It's like,
Yeah. I have a Cadet console because they did Bohemian Rhapsody with those same channels. I wanted that tom sound. I went out of my
massive.
way.
It's massive. Anyway, we digress.
No, but yes, that's what we grew up loving. We wanted
Yes.
personality of everything. But my point is like sometimes those accidents, those bad recordings, and I use bad because what doesn't mean schnizzle. Who cares? Bad is good, you know.
You know, it's as long as it's sincere, it has a vibe. It's you know, that's what people feel.
Mm-hmm.
It's the best song can be perfectly recorded and everything can be frequency lining up and all that and everything, or you can have, but it cannot move you. It won't move you sometimes. But you can have the worst recording, everything's out of phase, not mixed well, and all that.
If I'm a young producer, and not age, I mean just young in your career.
Yes.
If I'm somebody that's, I think, if you can and you're working with a band, go and see them live.
Right.
Go see them live because their whole aesthetic might be super trebly, aggressively bright like Korn. It might be weird delays, effects, Tool. It might be all this stuff. So you've got to understand, and then get their demos, get their live.
Absolutely.
Absorb yourself, and it doesn't have to be a 1 week process of obsessing about this new band. I mean, it should be something that's couple of hours of research when they're going to see get an idea of who they are before you get them in the studio, because a lot of what we're learning here is really valuable. There's two sets. It's like, how do you record a bass properly? And that's a nebulous situation, but how do you record it really, really well? How do you capture the essence of the player?
Right.
You know, and you are a learned player and you can really help us like with some of those techniques, like massively, like getting that. But then there's going to be kids that come in, like, you know, I think a Hooky, you know, from Joy Division and New Order.
Right.
Can you imagine if somebody already told him it's the wrong way to play? You shouldn't be hitting all those weird open strings. And no, that's not how you play bass. You know, or Jaco or anything like that. You know, that it's like.
Well, it takes the rule breakers to open to new possibilities. I mean, you know, if you don't push those boundaries. So yeah, I mean, it's every situation is different. Every song and vibe and is different. And you just got to be, you know, aware and tune into that. I'm looking at that. Another part of the question, more a question of DI, the bass itself, or the strings. Strings, it's personal taste. Jameson never changed his strings in 20 plus years. Neither did Duck Dunn. Some people change it all the time. I personally I like to keep strings on as long as possible.
Yeah. Like Duck Dunn.
Yeah.
What strings do you use? I don't know. I only change them when I break them.
That's right.
What a great line.
Yeah, and so you know, that all comes to, you know, I listen if like, can I get another session, another tour out of these? I mean, I will. If I can make them stretch, then I will. As long as they're still sounding good and they've got enough tone and they're not, you know, sounding too dead. But hey, you know, for certain styles, that deadness is desirable. Sometimes, you know, going back to that about the bridge and that, getting that extra brightness and the sustain, a lot of the time I will use, I carry it in my bag, a piece of foam that is like for a mute, which they used on the original Fender basses. It was built into the bridge. That Jameson dull sound is a foam mute that's inside the bridge, created that dull third, and that's another approach that you can sometimes use when recording bass. There's so many things you can do just with the instrument and with the fingers and the hands without changing anything else. So strings, yeah, important, not that important as far as I'm concerned. The bass itself, yes, it has to be set up well. I'm not even so critical about what bass it is. I've said before that Fender basses just work in pretty much any situation, be it rock, be it funk, be it jazz, be it pop. It will work in just about any situation because of those frequencies. Here, a P bass by itself is kind of ugly, the sound. But you put it in with the band. I mean, bass is made to be played with the band, isn't it? I mean, it really is. It's an accompanying instrument most of the time. And so, you know, does it sound, is it best that it sounds? That's another problem I have with active basses and 5-string. They sound full and fat and amazing and aggressive and everything by themselves, but you put them with everybody else, a lot of that goes away and is fighting.
I know you and I probably talked about this in one of our first interviews, but my first band in America was from England. When we came over here, I was playing bass. I was a bass player. And Don Smith, God rest his soul, one of the greatest engineers and producers ever lived, I came in with my Music Man Stingray, and he's like, oh, it's really nice. And he just gave me a 62 precision and said, this is what we're using.
Point made. Exactly. And hey, Music Man are kind of close to a Fender. I mean, they were made by Leo.
I think great for live because we were essentially 2 guitars, but the singer was just a strummer.
Sure.
So it was basically a 1 guitar, bass, and drums. And for live, it was nice to have that extended low end you could get with the active. But he was right. There was the personality disappeared. Now, don't get me wrong. We're talking Tony Levin, who tracks with the Music Man, and
Pino Palladino.
Palladino. I mean, they're
but that comes from the hands. It really does. Part of the question is the DI. I don't want to forget about that. I typically use most of my recordings, and on this course, the tutorial, it's half DI, half amp. And it really changes from that. I mean, I don't know what ends up happening when it gets mixed, but there's always the flexibility to do.
Well, increasingly, when mixing, with you, it's a lot less compression and EQ than I need with anybody else. But at the same time, I might use a little bit of multi-band on the low end, but I don't think I did with you. I shape the low end so that it almost sounds exactly the same. Now, that might sound really stupid for people watching this, but what I want to do is preserve exactly the way you sound, but make it more so.
Yes.
Now, there is just physics involved. With you, I do a lot less. And with anybody of your caliber, I do a lot less than I would with a younger guy, because like we were talking about, and I say, again, younger is not age, it's experience. Younger experience, shorter experience. So it might be like boom, 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 and there's always that unevenness on any bass between a low E and a high E up here. There's going to be less low end. I mean, it's just physical. However, we want it to preserve it in the mix. So what I'll do is I'll do controlled amount of EQ. So this low E might be the sound of the bass. That is the perfect sound. You hit a low E, there it is. But how do I keep that low end consistently all over the neck? So what will happen is I'll boost the low end. So when you go high, it preserves some of that feel of the low note, but I'll compress it significantly. So what does that mean? It means the low E just sounds beautiful. As soon as I go to that high E, it will go up because the compression won't happen until enough of the low end comes in. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So there's a lot more low end compression going on the low E because it's excessive. It doesn't need to be there. It just sounds the way you played it. And then as you go up the neck, it's compressing less because there's more low end boost going on.
Right.
So that's kind of a very naive but a very simple way of playing it. Your low E naturally sounds here. Here's all the low end. But I'm adding more low end that's being pushed back in. but as you go up the neck, there's more low end going on. There's more compression.
Yes, yes.
It sounds really naive. I'm trying to hopefully everybody understands what I'm talking about. It makes sense. But it's just like there's physics involved.
Yeah, and here's one thing. When you were sharing that, I realized there's something that I do. I will, because there are multiple positions on the neck that you can play the same notes.
Yeah.
I will make every effort. If you go to a, for instance, for this E here, always out of tune. It's a low D. Okay.
Yeah, I heard rage.
Okay, so I like to try from my end, and this has only come through experience of trying to keep that even tone, is instead of doing, if I was doing an octave part like that, I would rather this sound gets thinner on the higher string. I'll do it here because it's fatter, and it adds, it's not such a difference between the low and the higher E. See, that's more punchy. That's fatter. And rather than play that high E, I'll go for that one because it has more fullness.
It's interesting because Don had me, because he was the first real great producer I worked with. And that's not entirely true. I worked with Dave Anderson in England. I'd worked with, blanking on his name, sorry everybody, the guy that produced the Welsh rock band. The guitar player killed himself, apparently. He put Manic Street Preachers. I worked with the producer of Manic Street Preachers. I'm really sorry, I can't remember who it was. A Welsh guy.
Google it.
Google it. So I had done records in England. I also worked at a September Sound with Robin Guthrie, you know, who's from Cocteau Twins. So I'd worked with incredibly talented people. But it wasn't until I came to America that I got the benefit of a guy like Don Smith, who had recorded Stones and Tom Petty and insane, you know, been engineered with Jeff Lynne. I mean, I rest my case. True, really great guy. And one of the things that he had me do was find all different notes on the neck, and he made me play a lot on the open E string, not on the E string entirely. So I'd be like do 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 dee 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 dee. You know,
I like to do that. That's a very good point because it creates an even tone when you're doing that instead of going. Go. I'm all cramped up here.
Sorry.
You got the evenness of the tone, and so that will, it's harder work, but it creates that evenness that we're talking about.
Yeah.
I just like the tone because it remains fatter as well, without having to.
So there's a big trick when you're producing. It's just, if you can, especially with rock and roll, and you're playing just big chords, get the bass player to stay on the low E.
Yeah, as much as possible. Yeah. So it can. It's a discipline, and it makes you work a little bit harder. But I just like tonally how it sounds, and that to me is, you know, we talked about more question of DI, the bass itself or the strings. You're missing one thing, and that's the player.
Yeah.
You know, it doesn't matter. All that stuff is great, and it all helps, but it's got to come from here first. You know, it's all those things are just tools, but.
Yeah, I think as a producer, I don't know if there's anything that I can't combat unless the player is absolutely awful.
Right.
Within the first couple of months of their, you know, playing.
Right.
I think there would have to be, but even then, with patience, you can get around it.
Of course. Yeah.
But I'm going to tell a story quickly. I did an album with a band called Vaidera. And this is in the Academy, so it's kind of private. Probably shouldn't say. Oh, it's too late.
You're in.
And so I do this album with this band, and wonderful band. I'd co-written the songs with the singer, and it was for a major label. It was on Epic, so it was a big deal. And we went to Indiana to John Mellencamp's studio. he has with Mike Wanchek called Echo Park Studios. We're in the studio, everything's right. API console, we done How to Save a Life there, all these big records, blah, blah, blah. So I'm in the studio, I've got the band, I'm working on guitar parts, I'm working on drum parts, I'm working on bass parts. Plus I'd co-written the songs with the singer. Also, like Storm, bass player, was a real sweet guy. Of the 5-6 weeks that we did on the album, I spent 10 days on bass.
Wow.
10 days on bass. So, and we got everything right. I got him to get like a early 70s P bass. It was beautiful. I mean, one thing I'll say about Fender, quickly, sideline, one of my tangents. When it comes to Strats, yes, pre-CBS Strats are sexy. They are amazing. Pre-CBS Fender basses are amazing. But so are the ones after that.
Absolutely. My bass is the 70s.
Yeah.
So both.
Dan Rothschild is behind.
Yeah.
Great bass player. I think he has a 72.
Yeah.
It weighs about 4 tons. It's the heaviest bass ever. But, you know, when you think of like, you know, the big Fiona Apple song, boom, 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 that incredible tone, that's a 70s P bass. So that's another good thing that you don't, quick tip for any bass player watching or bass player, or producer who wants an arsenal of basses, just get like a 72, 73, mid-70s P bass. They're significantly cheaper than the pre-CBS ones and sound as good, if humbly maybe better. You're living proof.
Well, the 60s, I mean, they have their own sound, and it's a little bit more, it's in a box. It's from that era. And so, which is an amazing sound, but I found that the 70s is just a lot more versatile. They do all that stuff, but a lot more. I mean,
and they're still affordable. I mean, they're expensive, obviously, but they're a lot less than a pre-CBS one.
Yeah, absolutely.
And Dan had told me that. A lot of great bass players have told me over the years that don't get too caught up in the pre-CBS thing with basses. Strats, definitely. They something went a little wrong. I don't know what it was. I mean, obviously, there's tons of exceptions. None of this is gospel. But yes, definitely on the Strats and the Telecasters, there's something special. I think it's more about Strats. I played 70s Teles that are unbelievable as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just something about the Strats. But anyway, cut long story short. So I'm with the guy, with the bass player, and I am working with him note for note. I mean, I wrote most of the lines, you know, with him. I did lots of work. We ended up doing like punching in on notes. He's a young player, so he would like pull the strings, and so I had to work with him on intonation, you know, everything you can think of. And I'm telling the story not to shame him, but to just illustrate what you're talking about with the player. So I did everything. In 10 days, I punched in single notes where the intonation was out. We came back the next day after working on a song. We listened. We went and fixed it. I mean, we got wonderful bass performances. We got great tone. Every song had its own personality. I mean, I was really, really happy. I worked really hard with this guy. Anyway, so we finish up. We do vocals, we comp the vocals, we leave, we go back to Los Angeles, and we're at my studio, me and Mike Flynn, who's currently the head of A&R for Capitol Records. He and I had worked on the record together, co-produced it, co-written, all this kind of stuff. We pull up the record on the faders. You probably know where I'm going. Pull up the record on the faders, and we're listening, and we're like, wow, this sounds great. It sounds really good. Yeah, it sounds really good. Yeah, I'm really happy with the songs. Tempo's great, feel, everything's. The bass just didn't feel right.
Wow.
Because it just felt exactly what it was. Detail orientated.
Piece together.
Piece together. Not, and this is where we're in this really contentious place, because it's not quantifiable. It's not like, oh, you know, it's late or early. No, it wasn't. It was timed. It was punched in. It was done methodically. But whatever it was that. So one of my best friends in the world, my co-best man, is Scott Schreiner, who you met at my party, and you may know him already.
Yes.
Who's the bass player for Weezer, and their band was kind of a rock indie band, and they were playing with the pick a lot of the time. So I call up Scott and I say, "Hey Scott, would you mind coming in and playing on this record?" So we thought we would pinpoint one or two. We'd pinpoint the worst offenders. So we had like a short list of this is a single, it needs to be good. This is the second single. This is the third single if we get that far with the band. Here's like the best album track. Here's the second best album track, blah, 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 blah. Going down to like the piano ballad that probably was okay, you know, with the strings. So we had this short list. You know where I'm going. He came in, plays a P bass. We plug it in. I think we had a B15 ready to go. Stuck a whatever mic on it, an 87 or whatever we had handy, I don't remember. And he tracked the whole album in 6 hours. I think 6 hours, start to finish, getting tone. He came at like 10 or 11, he was out before 6. And it was just because he's a rock and roll bass player, he can play fingers, he can play pick, he had an evenness of tone. And he didn't know the record, but it was rock and roll. So it was A, D, and E, F sharp minor, B minor, C sharp minor, you know what I mean? It was all the things you'd expect.
I do want to address something though, because there may be some players out there who are not even primarily bass players, who are making albums, doing their own recordings, and they play the bass because it needs bass. And so, and there may be bass players out there who haven't been playing long and are like, well, great, what have I got to do? Spend 20 years till I can, you know, record a decent bass. Don't lose heart, because one of the things that I do on my tutorial, there's different approaches. There's one of the songs I play completely top to bottom. I charted it out, and then we recorded it 3 times, 1 take on each one, and then we comped the best version of it. Another one, I did not do a chart, and what I would do, and I often do this, is I will loop a section, be it verse, chorus, whatever it is, and I will go through and just play that section and keep playing it. It might be 8 bars, it might be 4 bars, and keep playing it until it's there. And like jam on it, because sometimes, you know, you're rolling tape, all the sections coming up, oh, and you panic and everything. But these days, the beauty of digital recording, you can loop it and get really comfortable with it. Just 4 bars or 1 verse at a time, and then it's like, okay, yeah, I'm really starting to get into this. And then it's like, when you're very comfortable with it, don't be thinking of the whole song. You got to think of the whole song, because you got to think what's coming next, so that it builds up for that. But the point is, just think of 1 section at a time, and then get that great. Get it as close to being great as you can. And then, yes, what do? I go on to the next verse and play it over again. So I'm not just copying and pasting, because I like to have different dynamic, a little, you know, the second verse, it may want to groove and build a little energy. So you do the same thing again. You loop it for whatever amount of time you need to, till you really get into it, until you're like, oh yeah, this is feeling good. Because anybody surely can just get into it for 4 measures or 8 measures, 16 measures, and get it feeling good. So you're not having to think, God, the whole song. But it's better to do that than have to do note by note. You know, if you can get a bit of a flow and a bit of a groove going, it's far better than that approach.
Yeah, I think, no, I'm glad you went there, because there was 2 points to be made.
Yes.
And the first one that probably came across as the obvious point was like, a great player who's done 1,000 gigs, whether it be live or whatever, is going to bring a consistency and energy, is going to play through those songs and bring the personality and everything to it. That's number one. Secondly is, the producer, engineer, made a big mistake. Me.
Right.
I spent a long time doing detail, and I didn't capture performance.
Right.
So that was my thing. So that's the producer thing here. In those 10 days of struggling to get the performance, he learned a lot. And don't get me wrong, the bass player like thanked me, and we can talk about that later. He learned a lot about tone and timing and groove and all this kind of stuff. But the way that I forced myself, not him, get the camera's about to go, because this is really important stuff. I'm going to change the battery here. You know what? Let's can we grab another coffee for my. Oh, sorry. I'm handing it like Andrew's available, and I'm looking down at my phone, seeing if there's any questions.
And I'll do a glass of water.
No, much healthier. We just
Yeah,
launched, for those of you watching, Ralph, we just launched the, and we can edit this type so we don't have to have this as just a live stuff. We just launched the Clay Blair one, which is
Yes.
really good. The video, Clay, the video on YouTube, it's the old Producers Workshop where they did like all the overdubs and mixed and mastered the wall.
Oh, wow, nice.
Yeah, it's pretty freaking amazing. Really, really amazing. Ralph, you're a rock star. Oh, and by the way, Ralph said
Come on,
here,
let's we got some questions.
yeah, well, Ralph, don't worry, Tony wasn't here when we were listening to it. So
Okay.
Ralph did a remix of a track, which I critiqued, and he played a bass solo.
Nice.
But I think he's all like, what, was Tony there when you did that?
No, I wasn't.
I wouldn't want to be, thank you very much, Eric and Andrew.
Thank you.
I wouldn't, this is my wife's cup. My son and I made this. We made this cup.
Well, did she not like it? That's
No,
why
no,
it's
no.
in here?
I just took it to say it was for Mother's Day. Look, it says Happy Mother's Day. Love, Charlie and Daddy.
Aw.
Yeah, we made this.
How'd you make it?
There's these places you can go where they give you like the templates and they make it really easy. I mean, obviously, I didn't perfectly make this. They give you templates and then you paint them. And
Like painted earth?
yeah, and Charlie, this is a few years ago. He was probably like 4 or 5. So he did it with me. I mean, obviously, I probably did most of it. He was 4 or 5 at the time, but you know, he did some of it with me, and it's like, it's a fun thing to do on Mother's Day.
Absolutely.
So, are we all rock and rolling?
Recording.
Back to recording. Okay, great. So, number one thing here. There's a 2-pointer, but I think the number one thing on this story with Scott and with the bass player from the band is, yes, a great bass player can listen to a song and can interpret it. And when they have the kind of acquired knowledge that you and Scott and guys like that and Dan have, they can bring the energy to it in the performance. So that's great. But the second thing, and equally, if not more important from the producer's point of view, is like, I think of that Eno story that I was talking about yesterday with, who was I talking to yesterday? With the Eno story.
Was it Chris? Christian?
Yeah, Christian James Hand. We were talking about the Eno story because he, I can say this on camera, he has the stems of a lot of U2 stuff.
Right.
And the story is, and it's famously told, is that Eno, when they were doing the Streets of No Name, tried to erase the tapes. Have you heard about that? Because they spent, what was it, 9 months on the song? Or most of the 9 months they made the record on that song, which of course ended up being an international massive smash.
Sure.
But Eno got to the point where he's like, guys, we have worked so long on this that you just need to go back in there and play it because it sounds so pieced together. And the story goes that the engineer, probably Flood, whoever it was at the time, literally had to like tackle Eno because Eno had his finger on the erase button, and they had to wrestle him to the floor, and they had to come running in. This is the story. How true it is, it doesn't matter. It's just metaphorically a great story.
Yes.
And for exactly the point that I think we're both making here is that sometimes the job of the producer is, yeah, help the bass player punch in, fix the problems and stuff. But be aware, like probably what I should have done, not probably, definitely what I should have done is let him do it in pieces and all this kind of stuff and teach him and all this kind of stuff. But then giving him the opportunity over a couple of days, the smart thing would have done would have go in there, and now that he had learned all these things about timing and feel and tuning and intonation, I should have let the kid go in and just do another take or 2 or 3 or 4, just of looser, knowing what it was. And I bet you, not bet you, I know I would have got better results. You live and learn. So I learned as much from that about myself as I did about players. Obviously, I learned that Scott Schreiner was an amazing bass player. Woohoo, who didn't know that? You know, he'd already sold millions of records. But I could have given the kid a better opportunity. After showing him all the problems and going with him string by string, note by note, part by part, I bet you if I'd let him go in and replay it a couple times ago.
Maybe, you don't know, but it seems like he took the lessons with him. And
I have one more thing I might add.
Yes,
Before I'm talking too much, as ever. God bless the too much coffee. I came to mix another record with Jim Scott, that I produced. The next album afterwards, so maybe 3 or 4 months later. And I'm sitting there and Jim and I are shooting the shit like we're doing here. And I told Jim that story. And Jim's like, oh, that's really cool. What did the bass, he said to me, and this is a good one for producers, what did the bass player say when you told him you had replaced him? And I was like, he's like, you did tell him, didn't you? And I was like, no. And he's like, and he told me a story of working with Whiskey Town, when Ryan Adams, working with Whiskey Town. And I don't remember which musician it was. I can't remember if it was bass or drums. Anyway, it was a big deal. It was either the bass player or the drummer. And they replayed it without telling the bass player or the drummer that it had been replayed. And about 3 years later, he's at a Whiskey Town gig. And this musician comes up to him and just goes, launches into it. Like, how dare you? Because you can't keep that stuff secret. There's always an assistant in the room, no disrespect to assistants, that just wants to tell the story to his best friend, don't tell anybody, sends an email to his mum or whatever, you know, it's really cool. I just tracked Scott Schreiner from Weezer. It's so cool. People can't, you know, you're a young kid, you're 20 years old, you're in a room with this rock star, like, and just, you know, what was he doing? Oh, it's this new band called Vaguera. They tell somebody else, and it's going to happen. I'm going to be at a club or whatever, or hanging out with the band, and this guy's going to come up to me and just be like, screw you. And deservedly so. And so he said, ever since that day, and whatever, in the early 90s, if he ever had to replace anybody, whether it was a triangle hit or a full drum take, he told the musician. And he goes, just deal with the anger then, and they'll wake up a month later and forgive you and respect you for being honest.
No, I mean, it's happened to me.
Yeah.
Surprisingly.
Yeah.
Just because they were looking for a different vibe. And it was like they went with what they felt was right at the time. And then the whole mood or whatever of the track and the thing changed. So they went with a different
They didn't want
kind of
blonde, they wanted like curly red hair.
That's right. That's right. So, you know, I mean, it's always tough, but yeah, you deal with it.
But you're going to respect the guy, and you're also going to learn something.
Yes, yes.
Which goes back to the Kenny Aronoff story, which I've probably told 1,000 times. Everybody's heard, but the Kenny story, he tells it, and also Mike Wanchek, the guitar player, and Mike Wanchek told me the story first, and then Kenny told me the story. Told a whole room of people the story, and they basically tell the same story. And it's in Kenny's book for those people that have read that. He didn't play on the first 2 Mellencamp records, and he was he's an orchestral drummer. You know that he can sight read. When he did that Medal of Freedom thing with McCartney, you remember when President Obama gave Paul McCartney the Medal of Freedom? I think it's called. Sorry, Americans, if I'm screwing this up. Do anybody remember what it is? There's 2 Americans in the room. They're shaking their heads. How do we know more about America than as English guys than Americans? Anyway, I don't know if you remember seeing it on TV.
I didn't see it, no.
But they did this like huge medley of songs, and all the musicians were changing. And I think Katy Perry and Paul McCartney's up like in a balcony sitting next to Michelle and President Obama and Oprah. Like, so this is a big deal. So you're sitting there. And I was working with them shortly afterwards, and I was like, "Wow, how did you like memorize all of those songs?" And they were going Beatles into this, into that, and like this huge medley of songs. And he's like, "I could never remember that." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Oh, I just charted it out." He goes, "I never even played it." So basically, what he did, and then I went back and watched the YouTube video. Highly recommend it. And he's got the whole thing. He's like literally just playing with feel, like. But reading like all of these different songs. And so I'm thinking, so how can a guy who's this good get replaced, not even play on the first 2 Mellencamp records? And so I don't remember who the producer was. Please let us know. Ralph, if you know who the producer is, please let us know. But he basically said, really like your drummer, but he's not good enough to be on this record. So Kenny, of course, was like, and the story goes that Wanchek tells me is that Mellencamp pulled Kenny aside. Kenny tells it like it was his decision, and ultimately it was his decision. But Wanchek says that Mellencamp basically put him aside, said, "You got 2 choices. You can walk out that door and discuss, and never be in my band again. Or you can sit here and learn why this great producer that we have hired wants to use this other drummer, which was probably somebody like Jim Keltner, somebody with more feel than a frickin',
Sure.
you know, squishy ball, you know, whatever. And so
It's a good analogy, I suppose.
I was going to use something a little ruder,
We
but this is
can imagine.
yes. Anyway, Breast, what? I just said guess what I said. Guess what I
That's
said.
right. Yes. Yes.
Guess. So anyway, I can't believe I did that. Too late now. It's all on camera and it's live. But anyway, and anyway, whatever the exact version of how it happened doesn't matter. Kenny did. He stayed there. He stayed there for 2 albums and watched a world-class drummer,
Wow.
not just technical drummer, but a guy with incredible feel and understood what it's to be a studio musician. Because as you know, being a studio musician is not being really good at your instrument and having great technique. It's about integrating and playing to the song.
It's a whole different approach being a live. Some live players are not good studio players, and vice versa. You know, so it's a very good point. Yeah, learning to be a good studio player. It's a whole different set of circumstances. That I mean, live I will dig in a lot more, but in the studio it has to be a lot more.
And you might play
contained.
some fun riffs so people go, wow, that guy was a great bass player. That drummer's amazing. That guitar
Yes.
player.
Yeah.
You know, live you want to hear that. You want to experience, see and hear spontaneity.
Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, my experiences over the years I bring to every session, there's been some that haven't gone well. I mean, there's plenty of those. We learn when we make mistakes. We don't learn when things go right. You know, it's like, so there have been some horrendous things. And
Give us some war stories.
well, some of it was I was doing this it was a big Japanese session. It was in the 90s actually. And a lot of it was not all my doing, and it wasn't even necessarily for completely musical. But they wanted to bring in a certain drummer, and he wasn't available, so they'd asked me to recommend somebody, which I did. And I'm not going to mention any names, but this it was very much relying on reading and charts, and then quite often with those kind of sessions they'll want to make changes on the fly. It's like, okay, that's great. Measure 24 to 26. Let's change that feel. Let's make it. And I'm good with all that stuff. I mean, I can play with or without charts, the feel, you know, just listening, or very seriously charted stuff. And the drummer I suggested, I had thought that he was that kind of player too. Turned out that he wasn't. And so they kept making these changes. It was a pretty complex song, and he was just not getting it. And it's like, I would say, oh yeah, that bit and that bit. Okay, I've got it now. And then they do the next take, and it completely forgot it by that time. So, you know, that was one of those things that left a bad impression on me. But because I brought in this guy, and it kind of messed up the vibe. But then, just to add the icing on the cake, these are the days of pages, right?
Mm-hmm. I remember them well when I first met them.
Yeah. And so I had a pager that was in, what was it, I forget, but it was in the same room where the drums were, and I thought I'd put it on mute, but it kept going off during the recording session. And they kept hearing this thing. They were trying to overdub drums and everything that were taking forever. So it was like they were looking at me, and then they kept hearing this sound that like a cricket in the drum room. And it kept getting in the way of the recording and everything. And then I suddenly realized, oh, that's mine. Sorry, guys.
Oh.
And then, you know, the playing just was not, everything just, the vibe was gone and everything. So, you know, that wasn't even so much about the playing on my point, but it's like, hey, if you're going to recommend somebody, make sure that you know they can do what you think they can do.
I mean, I rarely recommend anybody for anything unless I know.
Yes, exactly.
Because I've been burned so many times.
Exactly, and you learn that the hard way. Unfortunately, I'm the same. It's like people ask me.
I once had a drummer that was begging me to do a session, and he has got good credits, and he was begging me to do a session, and I had this, I wouldn't say low, but lower budget thing that came in, and I thought this is a good excuse to try out this guy. I'll tell you off camera who it is. So I try out this guy. He comes in. First of all, he's like, speaks at 1,000,000 miles an hour, which for me, as you know, as fast as I talk, I mean, this is like next level. He's like, so he was a little difficult to have in the studio because you kind of want people that can know how not to make it about them. So he was always making it about him. Always, but I need this and that's got to, and it's like, just learning the song.
Yeah, little red flags going up.
So, but you know what? It's still, I can handle it. You know what I mean? It wasn't that big of a deal. So I basically left to go to the bathroom. I come back and he's got the clients and he's talking to them and he's basically telling them that he has his own drum room. And next time, not to bother getting hold of me, yeah, for real, not to go to me, but you know, he could just do it at his own studio and it would be cheaper and he'd just have to pay him rather than paying Warren and the studio to cut the drums on this thing.
Wow.
Strangely enough, I've never used him again since. And he always asks me, and I always tell him why. And he's like, but this, and but that, and I'm just like, I can't trust you. You begged for me to use you on a session, and then you immediately undermine me and try and take the work. It's like,
I mean, he could have at least waited until afterwards.
Like, he thought I was he thought I was out of the room and he could get away with it. I mean, to this day, I don't think he thinks that he did anything wrong. But it's like, what we have to do is and so I've never recommended for a gig.
No, of course not. No.
And I don't go out my way to bad mouth him. But if you said to me, "Oh, this guy blah 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 wants to play drums," I would tell you the story, and then at least you would have
a reference point. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be like, well, if I'm gonna, because from a musician's point of view, if you recommended that drummer to come in the session, you don't know that he doesn't have a best friend who's a different bass player. And he's like, "Yeah, Tony's good, but you should try it, my guy." You know what I mean? Why?
And it's a reflection of us, isn't it?
Yeah.
When we recommend somebody, it's really tough. People ask me, I mean, even with bass players, it's like if they wanted somebody in a certain area, or somebody who can for a certain gig that I'm not available or whatever. It's really tough. I mean, there's comes down to a handful of guys.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really does, and it goes for any instrument and producers and mixers and everything.
It's all the big bass players that we know, all the guys that are working all the time. It's a combination of credits, of being able to go, I feel safe because this guy or girl has worked
Speaks for itself, yeah.
Right. And then secondly, just kind of personality.
It's a big part of it. It's a huge part, and especially for a band as well. I mean, even outside the studio, a band spends a lot of time together, and probably, especially on the road, 10% of that is actually playing music. The rest of it is being together. So
I think, because I think of a guy like Leland, like Lee, he's just a sweet guy to hang around with, like you. So it's like, and he's got, I mean, I think he just turned 70 last week.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. So he's got like 50+ years of credits, and he's an easy guy to hang around with. I mean, he's a great bass player, but he's not getting hired because he's Jaco Pastorius and blah, 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 blah. He's getting hired because he's a great guy and a great bass player.
And he brings out the best in the song. I mean, he's actually, Lee tells this story because people ask him to do bass clinics. He doesn't even want to take a bass. There's plenty of other people that can play way more than me. What am I going to do? He actually has limited use in these two fingers on his playing hand. Some nerve damage or whatever it is. You can use them, but it's not the full flexibility. So because of that, he has created this kind of slinky kind of style to compensate with that. But he's not able to play a million notes. He doesn't want to anyway. It's not part of his musical soul. But you know, has that stopped him from playing on thousands of songs?
No, and then, I mean, Django.
Exactly.
Fused together fingers.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's exactly. It's definitely, as we like to say in England, horses for courses. Just there's so many variations. There's the tone that somebody brings, the personality. You know, the credits do help because it gives you an idea of like, oh well, you know, Tony's done this, this, and this, so I know he's going to be able to hang with this kind of stuff.
Yeah,
so
right.
definitely, but in this world now where you don't know people's credits, there's other things to look for.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm just looking at last question here.
Yeah, let's do our last question.
Is there a grand solution for 90% of stuff, or does it depend on many things? Well, I think we have answered that, but I can tell you one of the grand solutions, which we may or may not have covered so directly, is just, for me, when I'm recording bass, I'm recording songs, it's all about listening and coming up with what is right. I listen to everything. It's not just the drums. It's everything. It's the emotion of the song, the message, the vocal melody, the content of the lyrics, what it's delivering, and so I am listening for what is the appropriate places and the appropriate lines and note choice. That all comes from listening to everything, and then those decisions of what the right tone is, how I'm going to play it, how I'm going to approach it, come from that. So that to me is the starting point of listening, which may seem like so very obvious, but a lot of, I think, more inexperienced players will go in thinking, what am I going to play? You know, what am I going to do? No, it's not about that. What is the bass part going to add to this to make the song sound better?
Mm-hmm.
And everything to me is to serve that end. So if that's the grand solution is listening, then everything just kind of follows from that. But then of course, you know, everything you figure out that, and then you spend a lot of time and attention on the right sound. And so, everything, there are many factors, but the song, the music, is the master.
It's wonderful. Well, that's a great way to end.
So,
thank you, my friend. Thanks ever so much.
Thank you.
We're going to have this made available for all the ProMix Academy members, for Produce Like a Pro members, so you're all going to get to see it, even if you weren't on the live chat.
Wonderful. Well,
have a marvelous time recording, mixing, and playing bass.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thanks for following along, and hopefully you get some from this. And I go into a lot of this and more on the tutorial, the bass recording and producing tutorial, and we go into it in real time, in real world circumstances, as I approach 3 completely different songs, and go into my process and decision making, and which bass I'm going to use, which tone, and all these aspects, all these things that we discussed in great detail as it happens in real time, in the real world. So I think you'll enjoy it. Thanks, guys.
Marvelous. Thank you.
Over and out.